Thank you for joining us to continue studying the Book of Heaven, the writings of the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. Today is the feast day of St. Louis de Montfort. So April 28th, there's a couple of options, and one of them is to celebrate the feast of St. Louis de Montfort. And I chose that option for our weekday Mass because St. Louis de Montfort really was prophetic about a time in the history of the world when the saints of our time would tower above the saints of old. And I emphasize this because Tom Fay, an avid promoter, great man of faith and of love for the divine will, and an excellent promoter of the divine will, and his testimony, when he read that in True Devotion to Mary, I believe is where he saw it, and he said it shocked him that it would be possible, because let's face it, we all have favorite saints. And when some people hear about Luisa and the height of what the Lord does and did with her, and the emphasis he makes on the height to which he is going rewarding her now in eternity, some will pull back and say, wait a minute, how about my favorite saint? And be assured that the saints are not competing with one another. They're glorifying God and delighted with every manifestation of God's power and love for his people. And they marvel over what God is offering to humanity at this time in human history. And so because St. Louis de Montfort's writings and the total consecration to Jesus through Mary, which many, if not all of those who attend our meetings or watch the online recordings, probably most have made the 33 days of preparation for total consecration to Jesus through Mary, according to the method of St. Louis de Montfort. There are other consecrations and preparation guidelines too, some of them 33 days to morning glory is one, but sometimes people will do both. Anyway, because of St. Louis de Montfort's pointing to this time in human history, I'm going to bring up excerpts from one of his prayers. First, we'll start with the sign of the cross. O most holy Trinity, we ask you to restore us in your image and likeness with which you created us, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Fiat, fiat, fiat. And we pray, O eternal and incarnate wisdom, O sweetest and most adorable Jesus, true God and true man, only Son of the eternal Father and of Mary, ever Virgin, I adore you profoundly in the bosom and splendors of your Father during eternity, and I adore you also in the virginal bosom of Mary, your most worthy mother, in the time of your incarnation. Hail then, O Immaculate Mary, living tabernacle of the divinity, where the eternal wisdom willed to be hidden and to be adored by angels and by men. Hail, O Queen of heaven and earth, to whose empire everything is subject which is under God. Hail, O sure refuge of sinners, whose mercy fails no one. Hear the desires which I have of the divine wisdom, and for that purpose receive the vows and offerings which in my lowliness I present to you. Receive, O benign Virgin, this little offering of my entire being, in honor of and in union with that subjection which the eternal wisdom willed to have to your maternity, in homage to the power which both of you have over this poor sinner, and in thanksgiving for the privileges with which the Holy Trinity has favored you. I declare that I wish henceforth as your true possession to seek your honor and to obey you in all things. O admirable Mother, present me to your dear Son as his eternal possession, so that as he has redeemed me by you, so also you, by you, he may receive me. O Mother of Mercy, grant me the grace to obtain the true wisdom of God, and for that end receive me among those whom you love and teach, whom you lead, nourish, and protect as your children and your possessions. O faithful Virgin, make me in all things so perfect a disciple, imitator, and possession of the incarnate wisdom, Jesus Christ, your Son, that I may attain by your intercession and by your example to the fullness of his will on earth and of his glory in heaven. Amen. And we'll pray the prayer for the glorification of the servant of God at the end of the meeting. And so, Mark, I believe we start on page 263 of volume 12, September 13th, 1919.
That's correct. September 13th, 1919. The soul must die to her own life in order to live from the life of Jesus. My bitterness grow, and I do nothing but lament to my always lovable Jesus, telling him, pity, my love, pity. Don't you see how I have reduced myself? I feel that I no longer have life, nor desires, affections, or love. All of my interior is as though dead. Ah, Jesus, where in me is the fruit of your many teachings? While I was saying this, I felt my sweet Jesus near me, binding me over and over with strong chains. And he told me, my daughter, the surest sign and seal of my teachings within you is that you feel nothing of your own. And then, isn't the living in my will exactly this? To dissolve oneself in me. How can you go searching for your desires, affections, and other things if you have dissolved them in my will? My will is immense, and it takes too much to find them. And in order to live in me, it is better to live no longer from your own life. Otherwise, you show that you are not happy to live from my life and to be completely dissolved in me.
So we have Luisa in this passage at the bottom of page 263, making it clear that she's not experiencing any consolations. And just before we started the recording, I mentioned that when we have sufferings, sometimes the pain can be so screaming for attention in our sensations that we can forget that there is suffering going on around the world. And thanks be to God, there are some that are suffering around the world that are striving to be faithful in their love for God and in their self-offering. And that's exactly what Luisa is called to do all the time as a victim soul. That's her mission, to be offering herself in the horrendous sufferings that we've already had described for us up to volume 12. From volume 1 all the way to volume 12, she is undergoing tremendous suffering all the time. And when she's given consolations of seeing him or feeling him or hearing him, it stirs her heart with love for him, knowing that this mission as victim, the sufferings she goes through, are pleasing him, alleviating his suffering, and being used by him to bring graces of conversion for sinners that are not living for him. And so when she has that sense of his presence, it stirs her to even want more suffering, so that she can participate with him in union with his sufferings, with divinized sufferings. At this point, and we hear it very frequently, the Lord has removed any sensation of his presence, any a view of him or to hear him. And so she feels totally alone. Now, she knows she's not alone, but she expresses many times in her prayers like he has left her, because it's a stratagem of love trying to gain back some of the consolation of a sense of his presence. But keep in mind, she's aware of this, and she's describing at the bottom of page 263 that she is once again devoid of any consolations. And really, when this is happening, our sacrifices are more pure, more beautiful. And that's what Jesus goes on to explain at the top of page 264, that when this is happening with her, he says he binds her with chains. So what he's saying is he wraps her with his love, these chains to protect her, these chains that keep her safe and fruitful in her self-offering. And then he gives an instruction to her, and so for us as well, in order to live in me, it is better to live no longer from your own life. Now he's describing a detachment, a selflessness, a moving away from preferences, even pious preferences. So a total self-donation, and that makes us more and more like Jesus in his self-sacrifice from the incarnation to his ultimate death on the cross. Go ahead.
September 26, 1919. Effects of the state of victim. I do nothing but lament my lovable Jesus. And blessed Jesus, making himself heard, told me, my daughter, one who is victim must be exposed to receiving all the blows of divine justice, and must feel within herself the pains of the creatures and the rigors which those pains deserve from the divine justice. Oh, how my humanity moaned under these rigors. Not only this, but from your state of privation and abandonment, you can see how creatures are with me and how the divine justice is about to punish them with the most terrible scourges. Man has reached the state of complete madness, and with madmen, the hardest lashes must be used. And I, ah, my Jesus, my state is too hard. If I did not have the enchantment of your will, which keeps me as though absorbed, I don't know what I would do. In Jesus, my justice cannot take satisfaction from two. This is why it keeps you as if suspended from those pains of before. But since obedience also concurred when I wanted you to put yourself in this state, it is now obedience that wants to keep you in it still. This is why it continues. However, it is always something before divine justice, that the creature wants to do her part. You, however, do not move in anything, and then you will see what your Jesus will do for you.
So this last sentence, he's reiterating the very point that he made in the previous passage at the top of page 264. This detachment, this total surrender, so that he can accomplish in her all that he created her to do and to endure for alleviating some of the impact against him and against humanity. But he makes it clear that some of the sufferings, and we've certainly had many references to chastisements in previous passages in previous weeks, that some of it must fall upon humanity, because if they're always freed of the suffering that our sins beg for, nothing would wake us up. We would keep running down the path further and further into a hedonistic seeking of pleasure, which you don't have to look too far in our world today to see how that's a constant pursuit. The commercials, the programs, the music, it's unbelievable. In fact, this was back in 1919 when he said, man has reached the state of complete madness. And it's madness when we think that we can pick a better path for ourselves than the path that our Creator established rightly for each and every one of us. It's madness when we take up the practices of the world that we already know have been revealed clearly in the scriptures, certainly the commandments, and the teachings of the Catholic Church that are contrary to the will of God for us. And now it's being promoted in so many ways and fought for politically. It's the madness that was going on in 1919. I would have to say, to me, it seems like it doesn't touch on the madness that with technology is being promoted everywhere, and especially in the educational system from preschool and kindergarten on up. It's a confusion to try and own the minds of the little ones. Just recently, the president and others have gone so far, have been emboldened by this level of sin that's raging in the world, to say that children don't belong to the parents, they belong to the state. In other words, the state has the right to override the concerns of the parents for their children and what they're taught. St. John Paul wrote that the first priority for parents is to safeguard, first to form and safeguard the faith of their children. But this is being contradicted in a variety of ways in our nation and around the world right now. That definitely falls into this madness that Jesus is referring to. He says, my daughter, one who is victim must be exposed to receiving all the blows. So we can't be literalistic there, because it would be literally impossible for Luisa to endure all the blows that Jesus experienced from the moment of the incarnation to his death. But she is sharing in them. And sometimes he makes it clear that even just a drop of the bitterness would be too much for her to handle. So he gives her what is possible for her, understanding that he sustains her even when the suffering should kill her. He sustains her in life because she still has much of her mission to complete at this point in 1919. And then this is why it keeps you as if suspended from those pains from before. But since obedience has concurred, when I wanted you to put yourself in this state, it is now obedience that wants you to keep you in it still. And the level of suffering is different in this privation that she's describing at this point. Okay, go ahead.
October 8th, 1919. Effects of confidence in Jesus. Continuing in my usual state of pains and privations, I have been spending it with Jesus, almost in silence, completely abandoned in him, like a little child. Then, making himself seen in my interior, my sweet Jesus told me, my daughter, confidence in me is the little cloud of light in which the soul remains so wrapped that all fears, all doubts, all weaknesses disappear from her. In fact, not only does confidence in me form this cloud of light, which involves her completely, but it feeds her with opposite foods, which have the virtue of dispelling all fears, doubts, and weaknesses. In fact, confidence in me dispels fear and nourishes the soul with pure love. It dissolves doubts and gives her certainty. It takes away weakness and gives her fortitude. Even more, it makes her so daring with me that she attaches herself to my breast, and she suckles and suckles and feeds herself, nor does she want any other food. And if she sees that in suckling nothing comes out, and I permit this in order to excite her to the highest confidence, she does not get tired, nor does she detach herself from my breast. On the contrary, she suckles more strongly. She knocks her head against my chest, while I laugh to myself, and I let her. The trusting soul is my smile and my amusement. One who has confidence in me, loves me, esteems me, believes I am rich, powerful, immense. On the other hand, one who has no confidence does not really love me. She dishonors me, believes I am poor, powerless, and small. What an affront to my goodness.
I dog-eared this page and started. Then I started to bracket different parts of it, and practically the whole thing is bracketed. You know, every passage is very important. And that's why reading it slowly and thinking about maybe 2 or 3 sentences and how you can understand it. And don't get frustrated, because the Lord will give us levels of understanding each time we go through the volumes. At the very top, she says she's spending the time in the midst of these pains and privations, and she says almost in silence. And so she's making it clear that while she's not complaining and she's staying quiet, there are times when she expresses how much it's difficult, and she's offering herself to the Lord. And so then he starts to address how important confidence is. Now, those of you who have read the diary of St. Faustina or have an image of Divine Mercy someplace in your home, hopefully you do, you see what Jesus required would be printed at the bottom of the image: Jesus, I trust in you. And so this trust is not a presumption so that we take advantage of his goodness. This trust is that there's never a moment that he loves us less. I was talking to a priest today. I went down to San Diego to have confession, and he had just given confession to, I think he said 80 first communicants that are they're going to be preparing for the first communion. I told him that's fantastic. It's a very large parish, and so he had been giving confession. He said that we had a little placard, or I guess a poster that said, trying to impart a trust in the Lord and alleviate some of the nervousness making their first confessions. And it had an image of the penitent with Jesus behind the penitent saying, there was never a moment that I loved you less. Come to me, there was never a moment that I loved you less. So even in our worst moments, it didn't stop the incomprehensible availability of his love to bathe us and strengthen us, to bring us into closer union with him. So he says, my daughter, confidence in me is the little cloud of light in which the soul remains so wrapped. And this is what he's promising. So if we try to apply this, Jesus, I trust in you, no matter what's going on, so wrapped that all fears, all doubts, all weaknesses disappear from her. It is possible in the most difficult situations, if one chooses, and especially if we're inviting the divine will into the expression of this fact that we are choosing to trust him, that he is worthy of all of our confidence in his goodness and his sustaining love to maintain us, as painful as it may be at times, to maintain us in our journey of self-sacrifice, so that he can sanctify us on earth and get us ready for our time when we are with him face to face. It feeds this confidence. It feeds her with the foods that we need to dispel fears, doubts, and weaknesses. So if fear tries to get a hold of you, you can be deliberately choosing to place your trust in the Lord. If doubts try to get a hold of you, you can be deliberately choosing to place your trust in the Lord. If you're recognizing your weakness, instead of focusing on yourself, you can place your trust in the Lord to get you through every trial or hardship. There was a woman and a man driving to church. There was a head-on accident. The man died on the road. The woman terribly injured and in the hospital. I went to visit her, and she started out by saying, "This is God's will for us." She said, "I cry a lot, but this is God's will for us." So she was not angry with the Lord. She was not demanding an explanation of the Lord. She was placing her trust in the Lord. And she said to me, my family doesn't understand this, but I have come to understand it. And we can apply the same principle, which helps us become overcomers in every kind of challenge of doubts and fears and even weaknesses, because he is our strength. Then he goes on, in fact, confidence in me dispels fears and nourishes the soul with pure love. So when you express, Jesus, I trust in you, you're being nourished, even though you may not feel any different at the moment, because sometimes the enemy will continue to attack, trying to convince us that our prayers aren't going to work, aren't going to do any good, so that we can, because he wants to try to bring us to slump into whatever method he's using to try to rob us of peace and joy. If we base our peace and joy only on getting what we want at every given moment, it's going to be very shallow, and we're going to be unhappy a lot of the time. But if we place our trust in the Lord, he'll give us a peace that passes understanding. Then in the last few sentences, the trusting soul is my smile and my amusement. When he said, I laugh to myself when he sees us trying more and more to draw from him, uh, it's not a laugh at us. It's like the chuckle of a parent that's very pleased with the sweet, the innocent efforts of a little one. A smile comes across the face, and how sweet, how dear is this laugh of Jesus. I want to say one last thing, though, related to this suckling from the breast of Jesus. Uh, some people get a little bit put off with this kind of terminology, but you have to keep in mind there have been saints before Luis's time that were given a mystical encounter of suckling the blood from the wound of the side of Christ. So it's not to be sexualized. It's not to be so in our understanding so physical that it blocks it. He is life. We eat his body, blood, soul, and divinity in Holy Communion. We drink his precious blood from the chalice at Mass. So keep that in the perspective when she's drawing life or nourishment from his mouth or from his breast or from his side. It's far beyond and more beautiful than we can imagine on this side of passing. Okay, we move on.
October 15th, 1919. The living in the divine will brings with it the state of security. Continuing in my usual state, I was thinking, how can it be? I am so bad. I am good at nothing. With the privations of my Jesus, I have reduced myself to such a state to make even stones cry, if this could be seen. But in spite of this, no doubts, no fears, either of judgment or of hell. What a horrifying state is mine. While I was thinking of this, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior and told me, my daughter, as soon as the soul enters my volition and decides to live in it, all doubts and fears depart from her. It happens as to a daughter of a king, who, no matter how much people say that she is not the daughter of her father, pays no attention. On the contrary, she keeps on going, proud, saying to everyone, it is useless for you to say the contrary, or to put doubts and fears in me. I am the true daughter of the king. He is my father. I live with him. Even more, his very kingdom is mine. Therefore, among the many goods which living in my will brings, it also brings the state of security. And since she makes all that is mine her own, how can she fear about her possessions? Therefore, fear, doubt, hell lose their way and cannot find the door, the way, the key to enter the soul. Even more, as soon as the soul enters the divine volition, she strips herself of herself, and I clothe her of me with royal garments. And these garments place on her the seal that she is my daughter. My kingdom is hers, as much as it is mine. And the defending our rights, she takes part in judging and condemning others. Therefore, how can you want to go fishing for fears?
We continue with the same kind of lesson. The Lord wants us to place all our trust, all our confidence in him. And then he gives us a exercise or an intention that we need to develop and be constant with it of fusing ourselves in the divine volition, placing ourselves in the will of God in act, in all that he's doing, wanting to be one with him in everything that he's doing, wanting no separate activity other than being united with him in all that he's doing. And so he gives that example at the very beginning, not to be fishing for anything that's contrary to his will. She says, how can this be? I'm so imperfect. I'm so limited. I'm so bad, sometimes she'll say, and she doesn't mean bad like we would apply the word today, but in her mind, so far short of the goodness of the Lord. And so focusing on that, the Lord has to bring her attention to the fact that all of that is a distraction, and that what he's offering is this unity. My daughter, as soon as the soul enters my volition and decides to live in it. Now, this decision has to be constant. So sometimes, I've heard people say, once saved, always saved. It's like, I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior now. I'm going to heaven. Nothing I can do, nothing can cause me the loss of the eternal glory that the Lord has prepared for me. There are many good treatments of that confusion that are balanced in Scripture as well in the explanation. The salvation that he offers and the sanctification that he offers has to be kept alive. It has to be constant. It's not like do it today and tomorrow everything is already done. You don't need to focus on this ongoing unity with the will of God. And so he says, enters into the volition, decides to live in it, all doubts and all fears depart from her. Well, that would be a good indicator as to whether we are constantly fused in the divine volition. If all doubts, all fears are completely gone, I think for most of us, if not all of us, we would have to say there are times when I have to deliberately apply the principles that we're learning or that we've learned before in faith, but especially that we're learning in the volumes. And if applying those principles are necessary, and that's a good thing if we apply those principles, if we recognize, in fact, we're told by the Blessed Mother and the Lord in different places to be faithful and attentive. So to be attentive to what's being taught and be faithful in the practice of it, regardless of our feelings or the circumstances at the moment. And then she goes on to acknowledge that he's explaining that the soul can be brought to this place in the certitude of being a son or daughter of God in the divine will, that the soul realizes everything that belongs to God belongs to me because I am a true son or daughter of God. The confusion that's raging in the world today is that people are self-identifying as other than sons and daughters of God. And unfortunately, even for many that say they believe in God, don't identify with the fact that they are sons and daughters of God and wanting that reality to be flourishing, blossoming, increasing. And then the world wants us to identify ourselves by our appetites, our preferences, what's important to the human will, including detached from any connection with the divine will. That's the pursuit of the world, and certainly the enemy using many different techniques in the world today to try and bring that about. I'm a son of God, and you're being called to be a daughter or a son of God. And the more that we realize that, the more that we can be choosing to live in the unity with the Most Holy Trinity of all that the Trinity is doing. Therefore, among the many goods which living in my will brings, it also brings the state of security, not presumption, but security, a knowing who we belong to, a knowing what he has already offered us, and a knowing that everything that is his is ours. Go ahead.
November 3rd, 1919. Taking part in the pains of the state of victim of Jesus. I was concerned about my poor state. The pain of his privation petrifies me, though I remain calm and all abandoned in my sweet Jesus. Heaven seems to be closed to me. As for earth, it is a long time that I have not even known it, and since I don't know it, how can I hope for help? So I do not even have the sweet hope of hoping for help from the people of this poor world. If I did not have sweet hope in my Jesus, in my life, in my all, my only and sole support, I don't know what I would do. Then, seeing that I could not take any more, my always lovable Jesus came, and placing his holy hand on my forehead, in order to give me strength, told me, poor daughter, daughter of my heart and of my pains, courage, do not lose heart. Nothing is over for you. On the contrary, when it seems to be over, then it begins. Of all that you are thinking, nothing is true. Rather, your current state is nothing other than one point to the state of victim of my humanity. Oh, how many times my humanity found itself in these painful constraints. It was identified with my divinity. Even more, it was one with it. Yet, my divinity, which held all the power and demanded expiation for the whole human family, made me feel the denial, the oblivion, the rigors, the detachment which the whole human nature deserved. These are the most bitter pains for me. The more I identified I was with the divinity, the more painful it was for me to feel the detachment while being united, to be loved and to feel forgotten, to be honored and to experience denial, holy and see myself covered with all sins. What contrast, what pains, so much so that a miracle of my omnipotence was needed in order to suffer this. Now, my Jesus wants the renewal of these pains of my humanity. And who could ever feel them, if not one who is identified with me, honored to the point of being called to live in the height of my volition, where from the center of it, she takes all parts of all generations, unites them together and repairs me, loves me, substitutes for all creatures, and while doing this, she feels the oblivion, the denial, the detachment of the one who forms her very life. These are the pains that only your Jesus can calculate, but in circumstances, they are necessary to me, so much so that I am forced to hide you more within me so as not to make you feel all the bitterness of the pain. And while I hide you, I repeat what my humanity did and suffered. Therefore, calm yourself. This state will end to make you pass on to other steps of my humanity. When you feel that you cannot take any more, abandon yourself more in me, and you will feel your Jesus praying, suffering, repairing, and you follow me. I will be the actor, and you the spectator. And when you feel restored, you will take the part of the actor, and I that of the spectator. So we will alternate with each other.
On page 266, she starts out by talking about the pains and privations, which we've had in each passage. But she goes on to say, I remain calm. So the lessons he's given her in the previous passages, because he had to say on more than one occasion, don't want to be unsettled, or don't try to focus on your weaknesses, your inabilities, your imperfection. Here, she's applying what he has told her. I remain calm and all abandoned in my Jesus. And that's a key for us. He wants us to remain calm no matter what's happening, no matter what kind of challenges or difficulties. I read before we started the recording a couple of the passages in this Easter season of St. Peter, reminding us that there is to be suffering for those who are living the life of faith, that's happening around the world. And we should find consolation in knowing that there are others who are also offering their sufferings in union with Christ's sufferings for the salvation of souls. That's what Catholics are supposed to be about. Self-sacrificing for the sake of others. It's not to be a time or a life, a path of selfishness and manipulation to get what we want out of life, but rather to receive what he wants for us in life now and eternally. And so she's remaining calm and all abandoned. Then seeing that I could take no more because she was suffering horrifically, he placed his hand on her forehead. Now, you know, that's a gesture known both in the Old Testament and in the New, and certainly in the church. The placing of the hand on the head, on the forehead, is an action of imparting the Holy Spirit, divine life, sanctifying grace. And so the very fountain of sanctifying grace, Jesus, is placing his hand on her forehead and offering her some ease, some comfort. He says, "Poor daughter, of my heart and of my pains, courage." So when he says calm down or do not want to be unsettled, when he says something like courage or any other instruction, it's not it's not just a simple suggestion. It's a command of love. We have to choose to accept courage, but he's offering it always. When it seems to be over, then it begins. So what he's bringing about is sustaining her with divine love. He describes in this passage that he was sustained by his divine love when his body should have died many times, incomprehensible number of times. Nothing other than 1 point of the state of victim. This is what she's suffering terribly from. Nothing other than 1 point. He's not putting it down. He's just giving her perspective. Nothing other than 1 point of the state of victim of my humanity. I'm giving you one little taste of what I endured in my humanity, he says. Oh, how many times my humanity found itself in these painful constraints. He suffered, he did it all, which we focused on a little bit before during this evening. He did it all perfectly for every single moment, every single breath, every single tear, every single joy, every single aspect of every human being. And he did it consciously. It's not like this big blanket and now it's over. He did it at every moment of his time here with us on earth. And he was sustained in all this suffering by the divine will so that he could continue his mission unto his death on the cross. Yet my divinity, which held all the power and demanded expiation for the whole human family, made me feel the denial, the oblivion, the rigors, the detachment, everything that human beings have felt, every pain, every hardship of and all that the human nature deserved. He did it all. At the bottom of that paragraph, so much so that a miracle of my omnipotence was needed in order to suffer all of this. So he didn't use his divine power to soften the suffering. He used his divine power to sustain his humanity, to endure all the suffering that every human being from the first to the last deserved due to our sinfulness. Then in the next paragraph, I underlined the portion that says, all generations unites them together and repairs me, loves me. This is what a soul in the divine will does, repairs me. And so that's the redoing that was mentioned before we started the recording. Redoing acts is to repair the lack of those acts being ordered in love for God. She feels the oblivion, the denial, the detachment of the one who forms her very life. These are pains that only your Jesus can calculate. So he alone understands the level and the value and the reward that will be prepared for souls that strive to live united with him in our sufferings at the level of the mission, that state of life that he's given to each of us. Then at the bottom, he says again, and he says it not just to her, but to us, calm yourself. The state will end. This too shall pass. This was something that Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta used to emphasize for the daughters of her order. This too shall pass. Not like I hope it's over, but to endure and to offer, make use of every opportunity. And he goes on to say, abandon yourself more in me and follow me. And so we would do well to ask the Lord in our prayer time, especially when we're going through difficulties, Jesus, place your hand on my forehead. I want to abandon myself in you. I want to make use of everything that you are causing to unfold in the course of my life, both interiorly and externally. I give myself completely to you. Okay, we go ahead.
December 6th, 1919. In the divine will, the soul gives God the love that lost souls do not give him. In creating man, God left him free and gave him the power to do the good he wanted. I feel no strength to write of my painful fortunes. I will just say a few words which my sweet Jesus told me and which I wasn't even thinking of putting on paper. But Jesus, reproaching me for this, made me make up my mind to write them down. Now, I remember that one night I was doing the adoration of my crucified Jesus, telling him, "My love, in your will I find all generations, and in the name of the whole human family, I adore you, I kiss you, I repair you for all. I give your wounds and your blood to all, so that all may find their salvation. And if the lost souls can no longer benefit from your most holy blood, nor love, nor love you, I take it in their place, in order to do what they should have done. I do not want your love to remain defrauded in anything on the part of creatures. I want to compensate, repair you, love you for all, from the first to the last man." While I was saying this and other things, my sweet Jesus stretched his arms around my neck and, squeezing all of me, told me, "My daughter, echo of my life, while you were praying, my mercy was softening, and my justice was losing sharpness, and not only in the present time, but also in the future, because your prayer will remain in act in my will. By virtue of it, my softened mercy will flow more abundantly, and my justice will be less rigorous. Not only this, but I will feel the note of the love of the lost souls, and my heart will feel for you a love of special tenderness, finding in you the love which these souls owed me, and I will pour into you the graces which I had prepared for them." Another time he told me, "My daughter, I love the creatures so much that if in creating the heavens, the stars, the sun, and all nature, I left no freedom to them, so that the heavens cannot add one star or remove them, nor can the sun dissolve or add one more drop of light. In creating man, I left him free. Even more, I wanted him together with me, creating the stars, the sun, in order to embellish the heaven of his soul. As he would do good and exercise himself in the virtues, I would give him the power to form his own stars and the brightest suns. The more good he would do, the more stars he would form. The greater the intensity of his love and sacrifice, the more splendor and light he would add to his suns. And I, spreading myself in the heaven of his soul, would tell him, 'My son, the more beautiful you want to become, the more you please me. Even more, I love your beauty so much that I push you, I instruct you, and as soon as you make up your mind, I run, and together with you, I renew the creative power, giving you the power to do all the good that you want. I love you so much that I did not make you slave, but free. But alas, how much abuse of this power that I have given you. You have the courage to convert it into your own ruin and into offense to your Creator.'"
May God have mercy on us every time we choose sin. This is a very strong point that he makes at the end. He talks about all the benefits, all the power, all the blessings that he has to give, both here on earth, but especially in eternity for those who strive to live the way he's just described and the way Louisa was praying at the earlier part of this passage. But he makes it clear that every gift, every talent, every ability, every good that he built into us in creating us uniquely can be the thing that brings glory to him and our living well, the gifts and talents he's given us, the life that he's given us, the mission that he's given us, or it can be the very thing that causes us to lose our eternal destiny. At the top of page 268, I underline the soul gives God the love that lost souls do not give, and I did that because a lot of times people have questions about redoing the acts of others or offering on behalf of others a divine praise, thanks, love, sorrow for sin, worship and adoration, acts of reparation that every soul owes to the Lord. And she's in this passage, she's especially offering to the Lord what he deserves on the part of those who are already in hell. It doesn't change their situation, but it gives to God what he deserves from those lives, those gifts of life that he had given that had been wasted along the lines of that last sentence of this whole passage. I dog-eared this page for December 6, 1919, and I wrote that she was required to write. So if you read that first paragraph, you see that she wasn't even going to address this. It felt maybe a little bit too personal because she's opening up about the way that she prays and his confirming the good of that method of prayer. Well, the inspiration to pray that way was given to her by God. So he's affirming what he's seeing her apply. And so I put in the margin, she must write. In fact, she must write this. It was so important that he made it clear to her. She says, my sweet Jesus told me, which I wasn't thinking of putting down, but Jesus reproaching me. Why would he reproach her for not writing it? Because he wants us to get this lesson as well. He wants us to take this knowledge that's imparted in this passage and put it into practice ourselves. So I bracketed the next paragraph because she now, having been reproached for not thinking that she should write this, she then gives us an explanation of one of the ways that she prays. So I bracketed it and I put in the margin, pray this. And you could take this passage, you could go to Mass, you could receive Holy Communion, you could sit in the pew afterwards as everybody else is leaving, you take a few extra minutes and pray this prayer, because you will see that he says that it brings mercy. So when you pray this way, it brings mercy, but it doesn't just bring mercy for our world right now. It brings mercy for those who are in purgatory. It brings mercy for those who are going to come after us. Because when the divine will is the animator of the prayer, then there's no end to the good that it can bring. It remains a living act, a living prayer, because he himself is giving his life in that prayer, his divine will animating that prayer. Then in the next paragraph, he says, my daughter, echo of my life. So she's following his example, and what a beautiful thing to have the Lord refer to a soul as an echo of his life, of the good that he does. Praying, my mercy was softening and my justice was losing sharpness. So that previous prayer, if you invite the divine will to pray and you're praying, he's saying that praying that way, his mercy is softening and the justice is losing sharpness. And this is for the sake of all souls. Your prayer will remain in act in my will. I wrote in the margin, his graces will not be lost. So if people don't want a relationship with the Lord or a sanctification, let's say there are probably many believers that just want to be saved. They're not concerned about sanctification. They want to enjoy the things of the world and not go to hell. And that's not a bad place for a starting point, but what he wants is for us to move to not only wanting to be saved, but wanting to be holy, even as he is holy. We had in the readings within the last few days, Jesus saying, be holy as my heavenly Father is holy. And so it brings graces, and his graces will not be wasted. So he makes it clear that for a soul that prays the way that Luisa was praying in this second paragraph, those graces are, if they don't impact souls, they will come back to or benefit other souls. Nothing of God's goods are going to be lost. We know from the scriptures, his word does not come back to him void, neither do his gifts, neither do his blessings and rewards. they are already established and will be given to some souls, even if they are not received or accepted by the souls they were originally intended for. His goods will not be wasted. Then in the next paragraph, another time he told me, if in creating the heavens, the stars, the sun, and all the nature, I left no freedom to them, so that the heavens cannot add one star or remove one of their own will, nor can the sun dissolve or add one more drop of light or heat in creating man. So he's saying all of creation is fixed in that it only accomplishes the will of God by which it was created. The sun cannot become the moon. The sun is going to be the sun because it is fulfilling the will of God in his purpose as sun. And this is the way it is in all of creation. Then he goes on, in creating man, I left him free. I wrote at the bottom, only humans can add or delete from their response to the Lord. And that's a wonderful gift when it's exercised properly. It's terrible when it is not accepted and lived. Then towards the bottom of this last paragraph, my son, the more beautiful you want to become, the more you please me. Even more, I love your beauty so much that I push you and I instruct you. That's what these volumes are for, to push and instruct and to build a desire in us. If we gain the knowledge and we want to receive the gift, to move from an esteem for the gift to a genuine love for the gift that he's offering. And that love for the gift is because of the genuine increase in love for him who is the giver of the gift. And as soon, this is important, I heavily underlined it, as soon as you make up your mind, so not yes today, no tomorrow, or yes for now, but later I want to do my own thing. What the Lord wants is not important to me later in the day. No, as soon as you make up your mind to live the will of God, then I run together with you. I renew the creative power, giving you the power to do all the good that you want. And if we make that decision, all the good that we want, he already wants for us. He places that desire in us, but he will not force it. Let us ask the Lord and the Blessed Mother to help us only and always want what God wants. Okay, we'll go ahead.
December 15th, 1919. The divine will, fount of good and of sanctity. I was saying of my always lovable Jesus, since you don't want to tell me anything, tell me at least that you forgive me if I have offended you in anything. And immediately he answered, for what do you want me to forgive you? One who does my will and lives in it has lost the fount, the seed, the origin of evil, because my will contains the fount of sanctity, the seed of all goods, the eternal origin, immutable and inviolable. Therefore, whoever lives in this fount is holy, and evil has no more contact with her. And if evil seems to appear in anything, it does not take root, because the origin, the seed, is holy. This happens also in me, when my justice forces me to strike creatures. It appears that I do harm to them, making them suffer. And how many things they tell me, to the extent of telling me that I am unjust. But this cannot be, because the origin, the seed of evil, is not in me. On the contrary, in that pain that I said, there is in me a more tender and intense love. Only the human will is found, which contains the seed of all evils. And if it seems to do some good, that good is infected, and whoever touches that good will remain infected and poisoned. Afterwards, I followed my course, that is, to substitute for all, as Jesus has taught me, and as mentioned somewhere else in my writings. While I was doing this, he told me, my daughter, as you keep repeating what I have taught you, I feel wounded by my own love. When I taught you this, I wounded you with my eternal love. And when you repeat it for me, you wound me and just by remembering my words and teachings. It is wounds that you send to me. If you love me, wound me always.
This wound that he's talking about is like the hot sting that we can feel when we see somebody doing something beautiful, loving, and self-sacrificial. You might see somebody doing something that's very loving and selfless for someone else that's in need. And for people who cry easily, almost immediately tears come to the eyes. Whether tears come or not, there's this warmth, almost like a sting, but it's a very pleasant recognition of genuine love. And that's exactly what he's talking about here: stings, punctures, pangs of love. And he's asking her to keep up this good work because it's pleasing him so much. You can feel the heat, the fire, the warmth of loving self-donation. On page 269, I underlined one who does my will and lives in it. So here's the qualifier. Doing the will of God is what we're all called to do. But in this passage in volume 12, already the doing the will of God would be inviting the divine will to act in our acting. So it's the next step of doing the will of God. It's not just doing it on our own, but it's doing it with the will of God, doing it with Jesus operating in us. But then he goes on and lives in it. So that's the next step. That's receiving the gift of only and always living the will of God in everything. It has lost the font, the seed, the origin of evil. The more that we strive to be fused in the will of God, removing any wants, desires, preferences that are exclusively focused on our own willfulness, even if it's not sinful, it's a detachment from the unity of our will with the will of God and only wanting what God wants in everything and at every moment. And he alone can bring us to that point, but he cannot bring us to that point unless we want it. That's what gaining the understanding of the goods that he's offering is so important. The seed of all goods, the eternal origin, immutable and inviolable. This is what he wants to place in us and have us live it as a reality. So for a soul that's blessed to be at this point of living in the will of God, as is emphasized in this portion, evil cannot take root in that soul. Because if you're only wanting what God wants, you're striving to see everything and how it glorifies God and is useful for the salvation of souls. So loving God first, with our whole mind, whole heart, whole soul, all our strength, and our neighbor. So the second commandment is to love our neighbor as ourselves. So when that's what a son or daughter in the divine will is striving for, it's moving in that either to receive the gift of living in the divine will or already operating in the gift of the divine will. Then in the next paragraph, how many things they tell me to the extent of telling me that I am unjust. It makes me think of, I've said this in other study sessions, as with so many years in the hospital, there were so many times that I would encounter Catholics that were going to church and saying their prayers, but could easily flip to accusing God of being unjust when they were going through any kind of illness or a need for surgery or whatever, and or sometimes family members. Mom or dad can be very strong in faith, like the woman that I mentioned earlier, that acknowledges this is the will of God for us, while at the same time saying, I'm crying a lot right now, but I know that this is the will of God for us. And then going on to say, but my family doesn't understand my attitude in this. A lot of times for those that are not formed well in the faith, and that's largely a huge percentage of baptized Catholics that all the way back for the last 60 years or so, the formation has been terrible in most Catholic educational sources because of the material that was being used, not forming people in the faith. All you have to do is look at how many people believe in the real present. the number of people that are baptized that are going to church. It's unbelievable. And it's because of not being formed well in the faith. And so when children of one who's practicing the faith well becomes ill or is hurt or even dies unexpectedly, it was a common experience of mine in the hospital to hear the children saying, I'm not going to church anymore, or this is, how could we, a loving God, let something like this happen? That if he was really a loving God, then this could not have happened to my mom or my dad. And that's the point that he's saying, that they even accuse him of being unjust. But he goes on to say, but this cannot be, because the origin, the seed of evil is not in me. So even when he sends trials, hardships, suffering, and sad to say, there are some priests and I would say many ministers, Protestant ministers, that imply that God has nothing to do with the pain and the suffering and the hardships, the chastisements that come. It's as if God is out of power or authority. Everything that happens in our lives, he is absolutely involved with, and it's always because of love, even if we don't understand it. And then on page 270, he says, if it seems to do some good, when people are not surrendered to the will of God, the seed of evil is not in him, but the seed of evil can be in the human will. And you might say, well, how come? Well, because of the original sin. We've all been wounded by the original sin. The grip of Satan is broken at our baptism. But when we choose sin, we can move into a type of partnership. I would say, hopefully, for most souls, unawares. But when you give life to evil, the Lord can't reign in that, and he can't bless it. And so he says that the good becomes infected. And so we want to be healthy. We want the divine physician to fill us with all that we need to move on the path of sanctification. I think this next one's fairly short. We'll do one more.
December 26, 1919. To live in the divine will is sacrament and surpasses all the sacraments together. I was thinking to myself, how can it be that doing the will of God surpasses even the sacraments? And Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, why are sacraments called sacraments? Because they are sacred. They have the value and power to confer grace and sanctity. However, these sacraments operate according to the dispositions of the creatures, so much so that they remain even fruitless, unable to confer the good with which they contain. Now, my will is sacred and holy, and it contains altogether the virtue of all the sacraments. Not only this, it does not have to work to dispose the soul to receive the goods which my will contains. In fact, as soon as the soul has disposed herself to do my will, she has already disposed herself by herself and my will, finding everything prepared and disposed, even at the cost of any sacrifice, communicates itself to the soul without delay, pouring the goods it contains and forming the heroes, the martyrs of the divine volition, the most unheard of portents. And then, what do the sacraments do, if not unite the soul with God? And what is to do my will? Isn't it perhaps to unite the will of the creature with her creator? It is to dissolve oneself in the eternal volition, that nothingness ascends to the all, and the all descending into the nothingness. It is the most noble, the purest, the most beautiful, the most heroic act that any creature can do. Ah, yes, I confirm it to you. I repeat it. My will is sacrament, and it surpasses all the sacraments together, but in a more admirable way, without mediation from anyone, with nothing material. The sacrament of my will is formed between my will and the will of the soul. The two wills are tied together and form the sacrament. My will is life, and the soul is already disposed to receiving life. It is holy, and she receives sanctity. It is strong, and she receives fortitude, and so with all the rest. On the other hand, how much of my other sacraments have to work to dispose the souls, if they manage at all, and how many times these channels, which I left to my church, remain beaten up, despised, oppressed. Some even use them to praise themselves, turning them against me to offend me. Ah, if you knew the enormous sacrileges committed in the sacrament of confession and the horrendous abuses of the sacrament of the Eucharist, you would cry with me for the great pain. Ah, yes, only the sacrament of my will can sing glory and victory. It is full in its effects and untouchable by creature's offense. In fact, in order to enter my will, the creature must lay down her will, her passions. Only then does my will lower to her, investing her, identifying her with itself, making portents out of her. Therefore, when I speak about my will, I become festive. I never stop. My joy is full, and no bitterness enters between me and the soul. But for the other sacraments, my heart swims in pain. Man has turned them into founts of bitterness, while I gave them as founts of graces.
It would be my hope that you take this passage. I dog-eared both page 270 and 271. It would be my hope that you take this passage and meditate upon it, sentence by sentence or 2 or 3 sentences at a time, and just sit with it. You don't have to do it all in one prayer time, but really to ask the Lord and the Blessed Mother to give to you in this passage what the Lord wants us to receive and understand, because there was a Catholic talk show, and one of the persons giving the answers to the call-in questions, the question came related to Luisa and her writings and on the divine will. And it was clear that the respondent, one of the hosts of the program, a good person, saying and doing many very good things, but it's very unfortunate when someone is available to answer questions related to the faith, if a question is posed in an area that they're not familiar with, or they don't have an extensive study of it, and then give an opinion that could sound negative, really without a basis, taking perhaps something out of context. So the answer that was given to the question about what this host thought of the divine will, Luisa, and the writings on the divine will, and the person said, well, I don't know, but I've heard that they believe that the divine will is greater than the Blessed Sacrament. And it was like, oh, how horrible. And what Jesus explains here, and this is why it's necessary to read through it carefully, slowly, because we would not have the Blessed Sacrament if it was not the will of God that we have the Blessed Sacrament. We would not have transubstantiation if it was not the will of God that does the transformation. We would not have divine life, sanctifying grace in any of the sacraments if it was not the will of God that we have the sacraments, and that He makes possible an imparting of divine life. Sanctifying grace is a share in the divine life. Then in this passage, Jesus explains that in the sacraments, it is totally dependent on the receptivity, the disposition of the recipient. So while Jesus is truly substantially body, blood, soul, and divinity present in the Blessed Sacrament, the efficacy of receiving Him in Holy Communion is totally dependent on the disposition of the recipient. You could have somebody that doesn't believe that He's really present and could care less, just going up to receive because everybody else is. Jesus is bound up. He cannot impart benefits to a closed soul, or even one that wants to take advantage of receiving communion to impress someone else and has no disposition to be received, or in the state of mortal sin. So what Jesus is explaining here is that it is his will to impart divine life in all of the sacraments, but the fountain of divine life in the sacraments and in every other aspect of existence is the divine will. And so if you get the chance, take this slowly and read through it so that if ever the question comes to you, is it true that some believe that the divine will is greater than the Blessed Sacrament? The best answer is the reason the Blessed Sacrament is the Blessed Sacrament is because it is the divine will that Jesus is truly substantially present in every consecrated host, something like that. Thank you, Mark. We'll end with this. Thanks for all who have joined us. I'll close with I have a couple prayers for our close of the meeting. Running a little bit long. We're going to pray for the glorification of the servant of God, Luisa Picaretta. O most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we praise and thank you for the gift of holiness you granted to your faithful servant, Luisa Picaretta. She lived, dear Father, in your divine will and became under the influence of the Holy Spirit, similar to your Son, who died on the cross due to his obedience. She was a victim and a host welcome to you, thus contributing to the redemption of mankind. Her virtues of obedience, humility, love of Christ, and to the Church urge us to ask you for the gift of her glorification on earth, so that your glory may shine and your kingdom of truth, justice, and love may spread all over the world in the particular charism of the fiat voluntas tua sicut in cielo et in terra. We appeal to you by her merits to obtain from you, O most Holy Trinity, the particular grace of her beatification, which we ask of you with and in your divine will. Amen. O most Sacred Heart of my Jesus, who chose your humble servant Luisa as the herald of the kingdom of your divine will, and the angel of reparation for the countless sins that grieve your divine heart, we humbly pray you to grant us the grace through her intercession that we implore of your mercy, so that she may be glorified on earth as you have rewarded her in heaven. Amen. Well, our time has run out. So thank you for joining us, and hope you will be with us again to continue studying next week. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.